Brand Origins is made possible by Partisan. From product photography to customer support, get an entire team to manage and grow your brand's social media pages for you. Visit partisan.ph for more details. You can go to any house anywhere in the world and it wouldn't be that hard to find a can of Spam in storage. It certainly has become a household staple. Because of shifting consumer tastes, the rise of health-conscious consumer groups, and competition from new brands, many legacy brands are feeling the shrinking demand as more people opt for less processed food. Despite this, Spam continues to break its own sales records, reporting a fifth consecutive year of record sales in 2019. Since the product's release in 1937, more than 8 billion cans have been sold and it is currently available in 43 countries. So it made me wonder, how did Spam get so big? We go back to 1891 in Austin, Texas. Austin is known as Spamtown, USA. And it all started when a man named George A. Hormel put up a slaughterhouse and meatpacking facility in 1891 called the Geo A. Hormel and Company. In order to put up his own company, George A. Hormel borrowed $500 in 1887 and partnered up with Albrecht Friedrich. Together, they formed a retail meat market and pork packaging business. Early on, the business did alright, but Hormel didn't want to settle for an okay business. Hormel refused to be complacent and pushed ahead with his plans to set up and operate a packing house. Most likely due to a conflict in their plans, Hormel and Friedrich agreed to disband their partnership in September of 1891. In that same year, noticing the market potential due to the rising demand for fresh pork products, Hormel and employee George Peterson transformed a small abandoned creamery into a meatpacking plant. It was a complete facility, which included a smokehouse and a slaughterhouse. In 1901, this company was incorporated and would then be known as George A. Hormel and Company. The company processed whole hogs, beef, and sausage casings. Being the type of person who is always pushing to get ahead, Hormel also opened the Hormel Provision Market, which functioned as a distribution center where people can shop for their products. This quickly became the town's largest and most successful retail meat business. But despite their early success, the company faced low profit margins and a rising number of competitors. Competitors who were actual threats since some of them were larger meat packers who were armed with state-of-the-art refrigeration facilities. Because of this, in order to survive, Hormel knew that he needed to expand and he needed to do it quickly. Expansion then became the priority. During the company's growth phase, Hormel brought his two brothers and other members of the family into the business. This allowed George Hormel to step back and devote his time exclusively to management. In 1899, the company invested another $40,000 to upgrade its facilities, building a new refrigeration facility, new pumps and engines, an electric elevator, smokehouses, and a slaughterhouse. 2 years later, the company acquired more land and built even more facilities, most importantly, the casing processing room and a machine shop. It was during this period of expansion when Hormel registered its first patent, the dairy brand. By 1915, it produced several lines of dry sausage which actually became quite popular. And now having upgraded facilities and new and improved products, Hormel set out to conquer more territories. Hormel sent out salesmen to enter other areas in the US, and by 1920, Hormel's company now operated in Dallas, Atlanta, San Antonio, and Chicago, among other areas. George Hormel didn't settle for more territories in the United States. In 1905, he also traveled to England to establish an export business. Since the foundation of this export business up until the end of World War I, exports formed about a third of the company's yearly sales volume. When World War I ended, Jay Hormel, George Hormel's son, rejoined the company. Jay Hormel is an instrumental figure in the history of Spam, and as soon as he came back, his impact was immediate. He uncovered a scandal that nearly put the company out of business. Apparently, money was being embezzled by Hormel's assistant controller Cy Thompson. Thompson had embezzled over $1 million from the company, diverting the funds into several poultry farms. $1 million in 1918 is around $18 million in 2020. And to magnify the impact of this scandal, Hormel's company borrowed $3 million that year to cover for the company's operating expenses, meaning Thompson was able to get about a third of this, which is substantial. The terms indicated that the company repays the sum at the end of the year, but sure enough, because of this scandal, by the year end, they were unable to do so. And so, George Hormel had to take extraordinary measures, confronting the banks and persuading them tirelessly to extend the loan. The company was in a terrible position. Terrible, but not fatal. As soon as the banks extended the loan, George Hormel was even more motivated to make sure this never happens again, making it a priority to fortify his company. Because of this scandal, Hormel focused on a more reliable capital management strategy. They dismissed unproductive employees and removed unnecessary expenses. And they did all this while continuing to innovate on new products. Now here's an interesting tidbit. Apparently, when Jay Hormel, George Hormel's son, was involved in operations, he took a trip back to Europe and met the owner of a small meatpacking business in Hamburg, Germany in 1926. The man he met was Thomas Horn. The guy invented a scheme for curing and sealing whole hams in cans. This would render butchers unnecessary since they will now be able to sell canned meat directly to consumers. Seeing the opportunity, Jay Hormel invited Horn to come to Austin to help Hormel launch the new line. And in 1927, Hormel introduced the world's first canned ham. But nope, this isn't the Spam that we know today just yet. 2 years after the canned ham was released, J.C. Hormel officially became the company's second president. His father, Hormel founder George Hormel, was no longer able to handle the day-to-day stresses of operating the company, and so he took on the role of chairman of the board. Under Jay Hormel, a new level of growth would be achieved by the company, but not before a bitter labor strike in 1933. In 1933, disgruntled union employees armed with clubs physically removed Jay Hormel from the offices of the company. The angry mob shut off the plant's refrigeration system and threatened to destroy everything Hormel worked for since the company's foundation. Luckily for Jay Hormel, within 3 days, the two parties reached a compromise. Now here's what I like about George and Jay Hormel so far. Every time they go through an event that threatens the company, they somehow recover from it and make sure that it never happens again. When the labor strike happened, Jay Hormel, who was now the company's president, proceeded to make great strides in creating innovative labor relations policies. During this period, companies didn't care much about the well-being of employees as well as their fair compensation. Under Jay Hormel, the company developed the annual wage plan, wherein employees were paid weekly, their hours fluctuating according to need. Employee was considered permanent, and each employee was guaranteed a year's notice before they could be terminated. Hormel also introduced profit sharing, merit pay, a pension plan, and a joint earnings plan. Under this plan, in 1983, Hormel employees received more than $4 million. From 1935 to 1941, this period brought forth a batch of products that would cement Hormel's dominance in the industry. You see, Jay Hormel's reign didn't only bring in innovation in how they treat employees, it also brought in fresh ideas on new products. Specifically, the introduction of legacy products such as Dinty Moore Beef Stew, Hormel Chili, and most importantly, Spam. Okay, so originally, Spam's predecessor was the canned luncheon meat. Apparently, it was usually the deli case shoppers who ordered these. These luncheon meat products were in their 6-pound forms, so they weren't necessarily made for home use by the consumer. Jay Hormel wanted to make one that your mom can cook for the family, one that was available in smaller and family-friendly sizes. Julius Ziglet, a Hormel employee, is credited as being the inventor of Spam. He was the Hormel team member who came up with the final ingredient blend and was the one who was experimenting on the original 12-ounce can size. It took several years of trial and error testing before the team discovered that canning the pork in a vacuum prevented the meat from sweating inside the can, which gives the consumer a tastier meal when cooked. Now here's a popular question that still has conflicting answers. Why was it called Spam? The lore behind the Spam name varies. Hormel himself claims that Spam was named after a combination of the words spice and ham, hence Spam. But then again, neither spice nor ham are ingredients in Spam. Another theory suggests that the name Spam is an acronym for shoulder of pork and ham. Another possibility is from a Spam TV commercial in 2019, which simply explains Spam as sizzle, pork, and expressing the happy experience you get when eating the product. But in an attempt to finally put this issue to rest, Hormel Company gives credit to Kenneth Dinho for naming the product. Way back, when the company was about to launch the product, in order to create buzz, the company sponsored a contest. To win the contest, one must suggest the name that will be used for the product. This was nothing more than a promotional event for Hormel's new product. Dinho is the brother of a Hormel VP, and as Hormel tells it, Dinho simply spit out the word Spam. It didn't mean anything at all, but Hormel knew then and there that the name was perfect. Funny thing about the name Spam though, I'm sure you're aware that nowadays spam is the term used to describe junk email. This was due to a sketch by the British comedy group Monty Python. In one skit, several Vikings repeatedly chanted spam in the process of drowning out normal conversation. This eventually contributed to the junk email being called a spam. This may not seem like a big deal, but at one point, Hormel actually tried fighting the usage of the term to describe junk email. The company tried its best to discourage the use of this word to describe repetitive email. Eventually, the company gave up, but on one condition: Hormel's spam product will be written in all capital letters. And that's why we have the iconic bold uppercase spam logo. And on the other end, spam for junk email should appear in lowercase spam. Going back, in 1937, spam was finally released. Pork shoulder is used in spam, a part that was once considered as an undesirable byproduct of hog butchery. It also has water, salt, sugar, and sodium nitrate. This blend of ingredients remained unchanged until 2009, when Hormel began adding potato starch to sop up the infamous gelatin layer that naturally forms when the meat is cooked. To promote the release of the new spam, Hormel invested heavily in advertising. One of the ways they advertised spam was in running a contest where fans were asked to submit unique recipes that included spam. Hormel wanted to create a 20-page recipe book featuring 50 ways of incorporating spam into everyday meals. Little by little, this strategy worked. Homemakers were slowly adding spam into the mix. But even though people in the 30s were slowly becoming accustomed with unrefrigerated meat, it wasn't until World War II when things really started to pick up exponentially for spam. In World War II, the spam brand got an explosive boost. Because canned meat is incredibly convenient for feeding the troops, since you don't need to refrigerate it, can be cooked easily, and can be a source of protein, the US Army ordered loads of Hormel's products, including spam. The Army didn't exclusively order from Hormel, of course, but still, spam was part of the lineup. And because of the heavy demand, Hormel's factories kind of became akin to a war facility. Demand was so high, in fact, that 65% of Hormel's total production was for the US government. In 1941, Hormel was producing over 15 million cans every single week. Think about it. This is the dream of every brand that's releasing a new product or one that's entering a new territory. Normally, what brands do is that they run promos so that people get to try their product with the hope that they like it enough to continue buying it even after the promo is gone. What happened to Hormel is every brand's dream, because when the US military selects your product, it means that every single soldier will be consuming it. The soldiers have no choice but to consume the products, and oftentimes they consume these products regularly for the entirety of the conflict. If the product is good, people might continue consuming these products even after the war is over. And this is what happened to Gillette. If you've listened to our Gillette episode, Gillette razors were supplied to the US Armed Forces in World War I, which then allowed the army to get used to using this product, and well, luckily for the brand, they continued using their products after the war. It almost feels like a cheat code when a brand gets the opportunity to supply their products to the army. It is estimated that over 100 million pounds of spam was sent abroad to both the American and Allied soldiers. Similar to the success that brands experience after supplying the army with their products, the same thing happened with spam. The armed forces ate spam all the time. They didn't have a choice really, and so exposure to their product was at an all-time high. In fact, people were eating spam too many times that they started getting sick of it. I'm guessing that they were okay with it at first, but just like everything else in life, too much of something isn't necessarily a good thing. The soldiers were eating so much spam that they started hating it. Troops were complaining about eating spam 3 times a day, and so unexpectedly, Hormel faced an anti-spam backlash. Hormel revealed that they actually have a collection of letters from American soldiers which can be safely considered as hate mail. And Mr. Hormel's response? If they think spam is terrible, they ought to have eaten the bully beef we had in the last war. Fair point, but that didn't matter because the benefits of introducing your products to millions of people around the world during World War II was that spam was able to reach countries in Southeast Asia, Europe, and wherever American troops were based. Spam's popularity in Asia is mainly because of World War II and following conflicts. Because of the conflict, the brand saw an entire generation growing up with spam. Though the war may have lasted for only a couple of years, the rebuilding and recovery of damaged cities took a while. Being a convenient source of protein, spam became the go-to meal for many of these badly hit countries. In the Pacific, specifically in Korea and Japan, starvation ravaged the country during the war, and cans of Spam were seen as an absolute godsend. American troops shared lots of things with the locals, from clothes to food, and of course, Spam. When the troops left, they left their Spam with the local population, which at that time faced food shortages. As a result, today, Korea is the world's second largest consumer of Spam, second only to the United States. In fact, Spam is actually packaged in gift boxes and given as presents during the Lunar New Year. Decades after the war, Koreans and Japanese migrated to Hawaii. This allowed the local food culture to mix with the immigrants' food choices. Japanese immigrants to Hawaii are known to have been the first ones to come up with the Spam musubi, a Hawaiian version of onigiri that binds a cooked slab of Spam to rice with a piece of nori. In the Philippines, when American troops introduced Spam, it disrupted the local food culture. It was convenient, it was easy to cook, and it tasted good. And Filipinos are known to prefer tastier meals, choosing saltier and sweeter tasting versions of a particular dish. Since Spam is on the saltier end, Filipinos loved it. A breakfast meal called the Spam Silog, which consists of slices of Spam, fried rice, and eggs, is a classic Filipino favorite. I guess part of the appeal of Spam also stems from the Filipinos' preference of imported goods, especially if it's from America. Eating Spam feels like you're getting a taste of America without actually going there. Coke kind of has the same effect as well. Since then, Spam has become a very popular and beloved product in many countries around the world. When the war was over, the troops were headed back home. Hormel's focus shifted from soldiers to the households. Soldiers who served in the war were sick and tired of eating Spam. This shifted Spam's role from being a convenient protein source to an occasional meal that mom would cook for the family. Eventually, it came to a point when Spam became the center of the plate meal option. Slowly, Spam became more of an ingredient rather than the actual viand. People started using Spam for sandwiches and as an addition to meal which included eggs. This is truly one of the impressive feats about Spam. Despite the ridicule it received from the army, despite the over-familiarity and contempt of the product, by 1959, Hormel had sold more than 1 billion cans of Spam, which is truly incredible. During this period of explosive growth, George Hormel, the founder of the company, passed away in 1946. His son, Hormel President Jay Hormel, took his place as chairman of the board of directors. But in 1954, only 8 years after his father passed away, Jay Hormel, the man in charge of the company when the iconic Spam product was released, passed away as well. Nonetheless, both George Hormel and Jay Hormel need not worry about the state of Hormel Foods Corporation because the company is doing better than ever. Even though new trends are emerging such as consumers opting for healthier food, Spam remains resilient. But why is this the case? Well, apparently millennials and Gen Z prefer going for organic or natural foods. This generation is more likely to become vegetarians or at the minimum choose anything other than food with lots of additives or processed foods. But at the same time, these two generations who embrace a fast-paced lifestyle also prioritize convenience, and there's nothing more convenient than preparing a meal from a can of Spam. Because of this, despite the healthy trend, in 2019, Spam hit its 5th consecutive year of record sales, hitting $220 million in the United States. Something that is incredibly impressive for a product that is over 80 years old. Spam continues to dominate the US canned meat market, owning over 90% market share. Because of the strength of Spam's brand, it is able to demand a higher price point. And despite being relatively more expensive than other options, people continue to go for Spam. One of the reasons why is nostalgia. Spam's taste and blue and yellow mark on the packaging hasn't changed all that much in its 80 years of being in the market. When you cook Spam, it brings you back to when your parents were preparing Spam for you and the family. But Hormel is aware that some variety needs to be added to the lineup. And currently, there are 16 varieties of Spam. The best-selling ones are the classic Spam, less sodium, and light. Analysts predict that Spam has great growth potential, especially in international markets. Aware of this, Hormel has released Spam in other flavors to appeal to local preferences. They have the tocino flavor, chorizo, and even the Portuguese sausage. But Spam is aware that despite its strong brand, there is always a looming threat in rising competitors abroad who are offering cheaper alternatives. And so in 2019, Spam has increased its advertising budget and has launched several advertising campaigns. And consider this, as successful as Spam is, Spam makes up only 4% of Hormel Foods Corporation's sales. That's how big Hormel is. Hormel is doing the right things for Spam. The canned meat does not seem like it's going to lose market leadership anytime soon, and is probably just going to get bigger and bigger. And I have to admit, I've been craving so hard for Spam in the making of this episode. So it's good to know about the origin story of the can of meat we've been eating since we were little. And so that's about it, guys. Now you know about the brand origin story of Spam. My name is Chris. I'll catch you again next time for another episode of Brand Origins. If you enjoy this show, it would mean a lot if you can tell your friends about Brand Origins. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. This episode is made possible by All Day Customer Support. As your business day ends, All Day's team wakes up and goes online to make sure that all your customers' concerns sent via Facebook, Instagram, and email are all attended to. For more details, visit brandbaker.co/allday. Once again, thanks for listening to another episode of Brand Origins.